Hey everybody, Lindsay Smith here, Professional Development Manager with CREB Realty. I want to talk to you really quickly today about the new CREB Rule change that came down yesterday that's going to affect how pendings are recorded on our system or conditional sales. And some of the things that I have done is I've contacted the Business Practices Department. I've been in touch with several other realtors, so I've gotten kind of both sides of the story here. And I want to talk about kind of the history behind the change, why it came about, and what the implications are for sellers and realtors and how they should proceed, and obviously for the buyers and their realtors and how they may want to proceed moving forward. So in the next few minutes here, I'm going to share some of that information with you. So the change itself is based upon the fact that now the sellers have the option to disclose whether or not their property has an accepted offer on it or not. So in terms of a conditional sale. So the seller can now give their realtor written permission not to disclose the existence of a conditional offer on the property. And the history of this came about where some legal decisions have been made that the information on whether or not I've accepted an offer is confidential. And our fiduciary duties that we owe our clients in terms of obedience and also loyalty to always act in our seller's best interest. It is believed that for the most part, or a majority of the time, it is in the seller's best interest to continue to show the property while it's conditional in order to potentially get a backup offer, or if that offer falls through, they haven't lost any marketing time. So in the case of acting in your client's best interest, loyalty, one of our fiduciary duties, and also for confidentiality, the seller can now give written notice to prevent their property from showing as pending, which means it just stays active. Once the transaction firms up, then it now goes sold on the system. So that is a new CREB rule change. In terms of implications for your clients, obviously on the seller side, this is going to play into obedience in their fiduciary duties. Now, I'm trying to brainstorm here about a situation where it would not be in your client's best interest to keep the property on the market. And the only example that I can think of is potentially they're sick and tired of showings. They don't want to prepare their house anymore. It might have been super active, in which case they can put the property as pending on the system, which will discourage most showings, as we all know. But for the most part, the majority of the time, there is always potential, and I know it's not the rule, it's more of an exception, but there is potential the financing doesn't come through, a home inspection doesn't check out, or condo documents don't come through, and the buyer will walk away from that conditional sale, as they have the right to. It's there to protect them. So in that case, it is in the seller's best interest to have clients moving through the property, so keeping it active on the system. So that's one implication. Another implication is that a conditional sale is now considered confidential information. So that needs to be treated accordingly. If you're working with your sellers and someone asks whether or not there is an offer, you can just say, either way, that's now confidential information and my seller is not willing to disclose it, either side, whether there is or there isn't. So that's going to be an interesting consideration as well. So some recommendations for the realtor representing the seller now. Obviously, you need to have a conversation about the pros and cons of leaving this property as pending or making sure that it stays active. And obviously the pros of it staying active on the property and never going pending is the increased traffic, or not the increased traffic, but the existing traffic will maintain, and they could potentially accept a backup offer. Some cons, if it happens to be very, very busy, the seller is a little frustrated with the amount of showings, they could get a break and take this off the market, and you'll get a significant reduction in the amount of calls and showings on it as well. The second recommendation that I have for realtors is obviously your client cannot legally sell their house twice, which means that if they happen to get another offer on this property, you need to ensure that there is a seller's condition on the offer to purchase stating that either A, the contract is subject to the initial purchase contract falling through, and by the certain time, obviously, past the condition dates or the pending date on the first one. Or the second way that you can say it is simply seller's condition is that this contract, this agreement is subject to approval by the buyer's lawyer, or to the lawyer's satisfaction, or subject to the lawyer's approval, however you want to word that. And that would be in again until after the other contract falls through. And the reasoning behind that is that the lawyer would never ever recommend that a client be locked into two contracts. They can't sell their house twice. So if the other one firms up, this contract would obviously die because there's no way a lawyer would ever approve that, acting in a client's best interest. So you can do it subject to the seller's lawyer approval, or you can actually state the existence of the conditional offer based off of your seller's recommendation. So it's very, very important that if you're going to accept a backup offer, you didn't disclose, it didn't go pending, and now an offer comes in, you need to be countering or putting in that seller's condition to protect your client. All right, so implications for the buyer is that now the buyer may be looking at properties that could potentially already be under contract. So even though they may want to put an offer in, they may soon realize that it's a backup offer, and number two, the current offer may firm up, realizing that they never really had a chance at the property anyway. So this could add a little bit of frustration to the marketplace. However, it is important to remember that most properties out there are not under contract. So again, even this circumstance will be the exception, not the rule. With this being the case, the realtor now representing the buyer is going to have to do a little bit more work on their part. Number one, you're going to want to educate your buyer on the fact of not getting too excited when they see a place, because we don't know for sure whether they've already accepted an offer, because that's confidential information on the part of the seller. So when we write an offer, there's a good chance that it may be a backup offer. So you're just going to have to educate your clients in advance. Otherwise, you're going to lead them for disappointment later. So that's one of the first implications. The second recommendation or implication for the buyer's realtor is they're going to want to ask in advance of a showing or an offer, obviously on the offer part, whether or not this property is CS. Now, the realtor representing the seller never has to disclose this, especially if it's been deemed confidential by the buyer or by the seller. So you may or may not get an answer. You might just get a purchase contract backed that has a seller's condition on it. And you may never find out truly what that seller's condition is if it's subject to the lawyer's approval. So they don't have to disclose that it's been pending, but you're going to want to ask in advance. The third thing is that if this contract is indeed going to be a backup offer, then you want to make sure that your conditions for your buyer are long enough past the seller's condition date to give you time to fulfill them. So if there's a 3-day seller's condition on there and you need 7 days to fulfill your conditions, you may want to make the condition for 10 days out, because you don't necessarily want to get a home inspection and have your client pay for it and pay for an appraisal or something when this previous offer may firm up and your client may lose that appraisal fee or the home inspection fee. So make sure your conditions give you long enough time after the seller's condition is done in order to give your clients enough time to fulfill their conditions. Hopefully that makes sense and that was clear enough in the purchase contract. The final consideration on the side of a realtor representing a buyer is when you find out and you discover that this property is already under contract, your buyers may want to put an backup offer in this one and continue to look for homes, knowing that there's a good likelihood that they will not get this property. In that case, you need to prevent your client from getting caught in two different contracts. So one of the things that I would put in there is, again, condition 2, the buyer's lawyer's approval. This contract is conditional on the buyer's lawyer's approval, and I would put the date 24 hours past the condition date that the seller has on there. Hopefully that's not too confusing, but what basically happens is, let's say they have a backup offer on a property. They have 6 days to wait before they find out if their backup offer is going to be the primary offer or not, because the other one collapses. And your clients go out and look at a property in the meantime, and they find something even better. So that's your choice as a realtor whether or not you want to recommend that. But now your clients can go out and look, and they find something better that they fell in love with. So now they have the opportunity to not waive their buyer's condition subject to lawyer's approval, because again, a lawyer would never recommend you're locked into 2 contracts. So they let the backup offer die and they put in an offer on this new property. So hopefully that's not too confusing for you guys. Bottom line is that when you are facing the circumstance, if you have any questions, call any of your managers. We have a manager at CIR on call all the time, so you can get a hold of somebody. If you have any questions, call your manager and work through this on a case-by-case scenario. Remember, this is a new rule change. However, you're still not going to run into it as often as you will just a normal transaction. So it's still going to be kind of the exception. So hopefully you guys are able to take the recommendations we made here and apply them out in the field, and understand that this rule was put into place to increase the level of representation that we provide to our sellers. Right now, pending sales considered confidential and may, adversely hurt our sellers. So this is a step forward in the right direction. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit of work on the buying side, but we all need to adapt. This rule changes happen all the time. This happens in other marketplaces, and we need to adapt and move forward. And hopefully this will allow us to further increase the professionalism in real estate. And a big piece of that is going to be educating our buyers in advance about what is happening. I know our buyers who will one day be sellers will certainly want the same service on their side. So one way to explain to them will be that. That's some information about the new CREB rule changes. All the best in doing a ton of business in the new year in 2012.